All right. Hello, everybody. It's Noel, and I'm here with Kaylie Kreatrix on the STICKSOUT podcast. Hey, Kaylie, how you doing?
I'm pretty good. How are you doing? I'm just in quarantine right now, so I'm very excited to pass some time chatting with you.
Where are you based out of, Kaylie?
Um, Between Montreal and Ottawa in Canada. So I grew up in Ottawa and moved to Montreal, and then am currently living just north of Montreal, but I'm constantly back and forth. They're like 2 hours away driving, so I'm back and forth.
Yeah. Cool. And so you're a Bugang manipulator, at least insofar as I know you. How did you get into the flow arts universe of Bugang and performance?
Yeah. So so Bugang was my first prop. I started, I think it was in 2012, although it might have been 2011. My date brain isn't very good. And it started by my ex was actually a super proficient prop spinner, and he had like every prop, including a set of Bugang, but he couldn't spin the Bugang. So I was just like, well, then I'll like start playing with the one you can't use. And like got so addicted to it, and was pretty self-taught for the first 3 years, and yeah, I was just like totally addicted, and it was the only prop I spun for maybe 4.5 years.
Yeah, what about the Bugang called you in the beginning? Like, what was it about the Bugang's manipulation that got you super inspired?
I think the shape had like so much to do with it. I wasn't really in the prop scene, so I didn't have much to compare it to. Like I didn't see people spinning double staves, and sure, I knew like hula hooping and staff spinning, but I wasn't super like surrounded by it like I am now. And I think just the shapes and the curves, and I really liked how it moved my body when I spun it.
Hmm.
Yeah, it just seemed, I guess it seemed kind of feminine to me, and I liked that.
And so, when was the first time, since there's not a lot of Bugang spinners in the world, when was the first time you bumped into fellow Bugang spinners?
Yeah, so it was at a festival in Canada called Astral Harvest, and so a friend of a friend who was teaching a workshop actually, and so I'd been spinning for, I'm not sure how long, maybe it was less than a year, but it was, yeah, so I've been spinning, and then went to that festival and was like, oh my god, you're teaching a workshop. Yeah, and there was like everyone else in the workshop had no idea what this prop was. And I was just kind of there, like hanging out, being like, "Wow, another Bugang spinner! It's amazing." Yeah. So that was I think that was in 2012, if I remember correctly.
Nice.
Yeah.
And so, wait, so how long have you been doing Bugang overall?
Yeah. So I guess it's been 8 years, 8.5 years. Yeah.
Wow. And so, it seems, at least of what I know of you, it seems that the theatrical bits of performance are things that particularly call to you. How did that get? How did you were you trained before, or how did you synthesize that into your Bugang stuff?
Yeah. So that's a pretty lengthy story, actually. So, started spinning Bugang. A little while later, a few years later, I moved to Australia for a bit, and there, oh no, you're not frozen. You're just really still. Sorry. And then so in Australia, they had a like full-time, short-term circus training. So it was like 5 days a week for 2 months you could train. So I signed up for that, and one of those options was act development. So like one of the classes or my specialties, I guess, I chose was act development. Because I was like, that's a great thing to be able to do. And so there I worked with, I guess, like, you could call them director, like an act director with the Bugang props. So he really helped me kind of conceptualize like beyond the normal, like this is me and my tricks sort of performance that you see pretty often. So he really like helped me push into the meaning and the creativity and the personal connection, like what emotions do I have attached to this performance, and that was like amazing. That was such invaluable training, and I feel like I've taken that and I have been able to apply it to more than just that act that I created with the director, but I was able to continue on and
so
try and teach other people too.
So I guess the question is, so I've noticed on the internet in recent history, you've translated from Bugang performance to more sort of sideshow. I don't know if it's the right word. Maybe it was the wrong word. Sideshow performance. How did that happen? How did you go from sort of an artistic Bugang? I mean, I'm sure they relate, but how did you go from an artistic Bugang spinner to this sort of artist? I don't know, like eating swords and stuff.
Yeah. So that was a pretty unique transition. I guess with a lot of prop spinning is very closely related to fire spinning. So I, got fully immersed in fire spinning and was crazy for it for a couple years. Learned fire eating, which is kind of a logical progression. But then fire eating is kind of that art that straddles, I guess, fire spinning and sideshow. So it can go into both. So from fire eating, I started being surrounded by people who practice, various other sideshow things like bed of nails and blockhead, where you hammer a nail into your nose. And so I learned those skills. And then I was very lucky. I met a master sword swallower. We were doing a show together 2.5 years ago, and he thought I'd make a great sword swallower, so he kind of just offered to teach me, which at the time I didn't realize how special that was. Like, it's actually finding a master is very sought after, and I didn't really realize how cool it was, and I was like, well, okay, sure, I guess I'm always interested in learning new things, so I said yeah, and he taught me, and it's become a huge part of my, I guess, artistic self-identity, my artistic identity, and a huge part of my income. Yeah.
So wait, is it scary? Like, I mean, was it scary to learn? Sorry, I had to move. There's some noise upstairs. Was it scary to learn how to swallow a sword? I mean,
scary, I feel like isn't quite the right word, but it was strange, and it still is very strange. Uncomfortable, still is uncomfortable, though much less than before. This whole new world. But I felt like, I guess I kind of felt prepared to learn, because years I had been spinning Bugang and other props, and fire eating really taught me to hone in on the minute movements of my body. Which sword swallowing has. It's all about your connection to your body and feeling the very small movements. Yeah.
How many swords can you swallow at once?
I only swallow one sword at once.
Yeah, I seen a guy do display.
Like a million, yeah.
Is that like something you work up to, or how does that work?
Yeah, it's something you can work up to. It's like any flow art, there's a bunch of different avenues with sword swallowing. There's endurance swallows, there's numbers, there's movement while swallowing a sword. There's a guy who does aerial straps while swallowing a sword.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So I focused mostly on prop spinning or juggling. I do knife juggling while sword swallowing.
Oh, cool. And so, is there a lot of is your full-time profession performing at this point? Wow.
Yeah, or it was until this craziness started, the COVID craziness. But yeah, so it's now been 2.5 years that I've done full time performing. Yeah.
Yeah. What was what was challenging about that, or what were some lessons you learned along like getting started and being like a independent woman with their own performance business, which to be honest, I feel like I see that more often than the independent male business. Maybe like as a performer, I don't know. I just see a lot of women really like driven in the performance world. But I'm just curious, like, yeah, what are some like lessons that you learned early on that you carry with you?
Yeah, I think a huge lesson was to like always take pictures, always take videos of what I'm doing. Even if, at the beginning it was some charity show that I wasn't getting paid for or whatever, like always treat your performances like they're the most, like that performance is the most important one, and make sure you document it because that becomes so important. Yeah, and just, I guess, yeah, approaching every show or whatever it is you're doing like it's the most important, and give it your all, and people will see that you care, and this industry is a lot about who you know. So yeah, keep your relationships clean and light and professional.
Did you go to school for? Did you go to college? Did you do that?
No, well, I did 1 year of music college actually, and then stopped. Yeah.
So in a lot of ways, I've noticed that you're a juggler, boogang, now sideshow, kind of in these three worlds at this point. What was your experience? And I know you were at the European Juggling Convention, but what are some of your milestone juggling experiences through your journey?
Oh, interesting. Milestones. Well, definitely getting asked to perform at the opening flow show at EJC in Almere in 2016. That was huge for me. Not only it like forced me to really put together an amazing boogang act that was theatrical, how I like it, but also like high skill level, which I love. Also, this like combination of having audience members who will actually like know what they're watching. That's such a treat. So that was like a huge milestone for me. And another big one, I'd say, actually something that changed my life was getting a repeating contract here in Canada. So that gave me like 2 months of work every year that I knew was going to happen, and I knew how much money I was going to make every year. And so once I got that contract, I was able to, I guess, take more risks with my business. I was able to step into full-time performing because I knew, okay, I'm going to give this a go for, 6 months was my first, when I decided to go full-time performing, I was like, okay, 6 months, but I know I have this contract coming up, so whatever happens, I'll be okay, So that was a huge milestone too, was getting that.
Where was it at? Like, what kind of venue was the?
Yeah, it's at a haunted farm here in Canada. So they basically have like pumpkin patches. They have like, I think it's 6 haunted houses. They have hay rides. It's kind of like a mini Halloween festival. Yeah, and so I do fire shows and still walk in there.
Oh, that's cool. Is there a community where you're located, like Flow or Boogang or anything? I don't know. It's Canada,
Montreal,
so I'm just.
There definitely is in Montreal. There's a very big fire community, Flow community, circus community in Montreal. It's a hub. In Ottawa, it exists. I'd say it's pretty small. don't know of another Bougang spinner in Ottawa, but there's quite a few hoopers. We have a few little circus training spaces here, jugglers. So it exists, though not thriving, I would say.
How do you stay motivated? I mean, I guess the question, does community motivate you, or do you not need that at this point? Or, like, how do you stay motivated if you maybe don't see, like-minded people like yourself? Like, I mean, you're quarantined right now, which is probably even worse. But, I mean, I'm just curious, like, how do you stay motivated?
Yeah, that's a good question. Because I definitely am motivated by people around me, and I love taking skills from other props and mimicking it on S.STAFs, and that's how I've actually developed a lot of moves. Currently, probably maybe the past year and a half, I haven't been motivated when it comes to S.STAF or Bougang. But recently, I just made a Instagram profile dedicated to inspiring S.STAF moves. So I made it maybe 3 weeks ago. I started it.
Wait, what's it called?
It's called S.STAF Inspiration.
Oh, intriguing.
Yeah. I think I maybe even messaged you at one point, but you might not have seen it. Yeah,
and what's the mission of this Instagram?
Yeah, so I want to highlight creative S.STAF moves. So I think a lot of people, when they think of Bougang, they think of the classic, spinning here, the classic isolations, and they're amazing. They're beautiful. And there's so much more to the prop than that. So I just kind of, that's it there.
Okay, keep going.
Yeah. So I just want to highlight, new things. So I repost basically any video that has S.STAFs that is doing something I haven't seen before. So whether that's, prop combos, or spinning with multiple S.STAFs, or a cool transition, or a whole brand new concept. There's all kinds of things. And basically, it was selfishly motivated because I wasn't feeling inspired, so I wanted to watch more videos. I wanted to see what other people were doing. And the good part about it is other people can also get inspired. So.
Yeah, I guess let's transition. We're kind of jumping around, but now let's ask about STAF, because that's a big question, because I've only recently, I don't know, past 2 years, maybe 3, since I've been with Lauren more working with her, been inspired by STAF, but I've also found that to be sort of true, where it seems like there is like I don't know, it's kind of a weird thing. It seems like there's this weird level of entry for people to like not spin S-stabs and S-stabs, and then when you're on that level, there seems to be like a huge flat area of everybody kind of doing the same S-stab technique. And there's not a lot of people like pushing into the other areas when, like, just to give some examples, there's contact, there's the bound stuff, there's sort of the quad magnet stuff, there's all this other stuff. It's kind of interesting how, I don't know, like, where do you think F-stabs can go? Because that's kind of where I'm curious, because I don't see a ton of stuff that's really inspiring necessarily either.
Yeah, well, I think the beauty about STAF is it's such a new prop that, like, it could go anywhere, Like, what can you imagine? Do it, and that's, there's no wrong direction. Not that there's ever a wrong direction in prop manipulation, but I think there's just, there's, like, no trails to follow, so it's kind of a bit of a free-for-all, which can be frustrating as a beginner, but also really liberating in ways because, because there's so much potential. I'd love to see. What am I saying? I'd love to see, like, more intimate connections, I guess, between the people spinning it and the prop. So, there's a lot of, like, out here spinning, up your spinning. And personally, I just love to see kind of like a dance partner, I guess. And so like that's the direction I'm pushing for.
Yeah.
But there's so many ways to go.
Yeah, just as like a weird discussion on technique. It's interesting because I'll just use something that's unrelated and then go to related. Like in doubles contact, there's this concept of folding, right? I don't know if you've heard of it. And it's really specific and really stylized. I don't know how to describe it, but it requires like a very hardcore set of steps, and like the motion of it is very counterintuitive to like everything you've ever done with the two stabs ever before. But somebody figured that out, right? And I was thinking about in Bugang, whatever that Bugang spinner Arthur Cow. What that guy does, if for those who are watching haven't seen him, you should check him out. He does some really weird stuff that is like completely like you would never. It for anyone who's not, it like sits on his hand and it like spins on the tip of his hand. It's like the weirdest thing, but it actually like works, and I find like that's the kind of manipulation that I'm really interested in, where there's like a way to use the prop. Like there's simple transfer, like you say like you can balance a prop, okay, then you balance stuff. But like things like doubles folding or what Arthur is doing is something that's completely different. That's like you're developing an entire new vocabulary of technique that like nobody was gonna find, which I find that to be really inspiring. That kind of manipulation, just
and I love seeing that too, like completely creative ways. You know, something I'm like, wow, I would have never thought to do that. And I love seeing people do it, and because then I can learn from it. I get inspired. I can, light bulbs start popping when I see something like Arthur Spin or a bunch of other amazing creatives, Bugang creatives.
So, okay, let's get some random questions. All right, we got the last 10 minutes here. We'll hit 30. I'm gonna keep you on too long. And plus, this thing like died when I was with Sage. I had like an hour long with Sage, and it's like so frustrating. So like,
that is.
But question for you is, we're just gonna get kind of like on a different angle here. So you're a woman and you're Asian or Indian. I don't know.
Half Asian, yeah.
Okay, half Asian. Do you ever like? Because I'm half Asian too, but I'm Puerto Rican as well. Do you ever like? Have you ever felt like any levels of discriminated against by being either of those, like within the flow juggle sideshow universe? Like, I'm just curious if you've ever bumped into any of that.
I mean, I've definitely felt. I'm not sure if I'd say discriminated, but I have felt like it changes people's perspective of me. Yeah. Maybe, even if it comes down to like being the only woman in a show, of a cast of 10 people and it's 1 or 2 women. And I'm like, okay, I wouldn't really call that a direct discrimination, but I do think not that it's harder, but it's just a bit more isolating, maybe. And being both a woman and being a visible minority, those are both super layered, topics in themselves. Yeah, I don't know. I'd say yes. I guess I have felt some form of discrimination, not often directly.
Yeah, and I think that the discussion, I guess the margins and mainstream sort of conversation kind of helps in that way, where there's like, when you're in the mainstream group, right, like it's not as easy to recognize the marginalized group in that situation. So if you're in a show with a bunch of guys, they're not going to notice that you're the only 2 girls, but if you're the only 2 girls, you're like, crap, I'm the only girl in this show. So that's like, and I think that happens in like all of our lives, not just for everybody. And I think that that's like a discussion that I wonder, like if flow arts could have that conversation just a little bit more, right? Like, and not just about like ethnicity or gender, but also around like ability. I think that's a really good conversation to have that about, like, because some people in our community lose, like most people, including myself eventually, are going to lose like motor ability, like being able to do what I do right now, and it's already started, right, is going to continue to occur. And I think that just like recognizing that versus like if we're all competing for this really hard trick and there's this person on the side that wishes they could, but like right now that's not a possibility due to a disability, at least like recognizing that that's a thing on both. Yeah. So I don't know. I've just been thinking about that conversation quite a bit recently.
How would someone recognize it? Like what? Yeah. What would that actually look like? Would it be maybe more representation? More discussion about it?
Yeah, I don't know. That's the thing, right? Like, you don't want. I mean, I don't know. Not you, but people might not want. If you're the only women in the show, it's like not good to be like you're the only. Like, say it. You're the only two women in the show. Like, so like that level, it's like maybe you wouldn't want that. So I'm not really sure. I think like a sensitive compassion towards those people, which I think has to just start with like awareness, right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Just being like, okay, this is what it is, right? So, you know, if you're the only two women in the show, I'm not going to be the guy to go up and tell you or try to remind you some shit or some stuff. I'm just going to leave you alone or whatever. I don't know. Whatever that is.
Yeah.
I think that's the first step. I think in all of this stuff, it just feels to me that identity work is kind of at the core of that. I think like some people, let's say you injured yourself and you can't spin, you might not be acting confident in feeling like you can. You might have all sorts of other, like, I was a floor artist, now I'm not, or like all this other stuff going on inside that's like not necessarily like you might not be ready for that conversation, right? That's just kind of an interesting thing to consider. And I think that identity work is something that flow arts like kind of lacks right now in a lot of ways, because the more you know who you are, the ways that you're like in sort of the mainstream group or whatever, and ways in which you're in the sort of marginalized group, that's helpful, right? Like this is helpful to seeing other people in those positions. That's my 2 cents there, I guess.
I agree.
So I guess the last question here. Oh, make sure we're good. Okay, so the last question I have for you is, what kind of message do you have for other, like the flow world or circus, burlesque world, that like if you were to like motivate and inspire people, because unfortunately you're going to inspire maybe 4 people that actually watch this, but in addition, maybe in a year it'll, but like if you could do that, like what kind of message would you leave?
Ooh. You should have asked me this beforehand, and I could have prepared.
I know. I'm sorry. I just like show up and then we're recording. It's just kind of how it goes.
I guess what pops to my mind initially is like pull your inspiration from as many places as possible. You know, regardless of what you're trying to achieve, like it's great to just to have a wide source of inspiration, whether that's, you know, nature or your friends or a different type of art or even just a different flow prop. You know, I got a lot of inspiration from hooping, and and I think that is one way to keep it fresh, one way to be creative, one way to just to like create your own sort of unique type of expression, type of art. And I guess that's what I'd say.
Yeah, that was great. Well, Kaylie, thank you for joining us on this Sticks Out podcast, and you know, stay in touch, tell people about this small project going on. And stay online, and we'll talk for a second afterwards. But again, thanks a bunch.
Yeah, thank you so much. Bye.